Promising signs that COVID booster jabs will protect people against the new Omicron variant. Researchers find that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines give the best overall booster response. Scientists say it's excellent news.
The data on the boosters is fantastic because it's suggesting that if you've had your first and second shot followed by the booster, you've got supercharged immunity.
We'll have more on these latest findings and find out how the booster rollout is progressing. Also this lunchtime, the father and stepmother of 6-year-old Arthur Lavigno Hughes appear in court to be sentenced for his killing. Appalling disorder that led to a day of national shame. Strong findings from the review into events at the Euro 2020 final at Wembley.
As thousands of people enter their second week without power following Storm Irwin, communities are rallying to provide hot meals and warm shelter.
Stop me 'cause I'm having a good time, yeah.
And it's Panto season. Oh yes it is. We find out how performers and theatregoers are feeling about Christmas shows against the backdrop of COVID.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, big changes at Yorkshire County Cricket as 16 members of staff, including the Director of Cricket, leave in the wake of the racism scandal.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. British scientists studying 7 Covid19 vaccines have found that Pfizer and Moderna are the most effective to use as booster jabs. It's the first study of how well boosters work, and the researchers found promising signs that a third jab also protects against illness and death from the new Omicron variant. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes has all the details.
Amid the uncertainty around the Omicron variant, some good news. Further confirmation the booster jabs being used in the UK are safe and effective. A study involving nearly 3,000 adults saw boosters given about 3 months after second doses of AstraZeneca or Pfizer. 7 vaccines were studied in all, but the 2 used for boosters in the UK, Pfizer and Moderna, performed the best.
We saw very encouraging results from all the vaccines we tested in terms of the magnitude of the boost of the antibodies, but also in terms of how the body remembers the vaccine and then is able to respond in future, the long-term memory.
Boosters can cut the risk of infection by more than 93%. The plan is to offer them to all adults aged over 18 in the UK before the end of January. And it will usually be either the Pfizer or Moderna jab while scientists find out more about the Omicron variant. Much of that work is taking place in South Africa, where Omicron is driving a rapid growth in infection rates. The very early evidence suggests there may be a higher risk of reinfection from Omicron compared with the Alpha, Beta or Delta variants, but it's hard to say yet whether it will lead to more hospitalizations or deaths.
At the moment, we're not seeing the very high rates in terms of hospitalization, but it's early days yet. So I think what's important is to continue to observe and monitor, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a much better picture.
The emergence of the Omicron variant has prompted big changes to the UK's vaccination programme. As well as offering boosters to more people, the time between second dose and booster has been slashed from 6 to 3 months. So the encouraging news on how effective they are is welcome.
The data on the boosters is fantastic because it's suggesting that if you've had your first and second shot followed by the booster, you've got supercharged immunity. And this will help us to at least deal with some of the effects of Omicron when it really takes off here.
There have been some problems. Delays in changing the legal framework to accommodate the new plans have seen some people turned away from walk-in clinics or unable to book appointments. Now, millions of people are being urged to wait to be called for their jab rather than try and contact the NHS. Little wonder that health officials describe the UK's vaccine rollout programme as the greatest logistical exercise the health service has faced since the war. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
And our health editor, Hugh Pym, is with me. And let's pick up on that. I mean, where are we exactly with getting everybody that third jab?
Well, Jane, on Monday, of course, it was announced by the expert committee advising ministers, the JCVI, that as a response to the threat posed by the new variant, the gap between the second dose and the booster would be reduced from 6 months to 3, and it would be available to under 40s. And people have been turning up at walk-in vaccination centres hoping that it will happen straight away, and it hasn't. And some have been asked to go away and just come back when they're invited to. So there are some key messages. Don't come in for your booster unless you're invited to. But secondly, the mechanics on the national booking websites are not there yet. And the vaccinators and the people running the vaccine centres have not got the legal framework that they need to be entitled to change the protocols. Now, that might all sound rather bureaucratic, but it does take time to get it in place. And as we heard there in Dominic's report, Scotland's National Clinical Director, Professor Jason Leach, saying it is the greatest challenge, the overall vaccination programme for the NHS since the war. So I'm told it could take another few days, and it may well not begin in earnest, certainly in England, until December the 13th. That's Monday week. GPs are also involved in this. Talks need to take place with them. They're ongoing about what other type of work that they maybe suspend, less urgent work, so they can focus on the vaccine. So it is a huge, huge ask of the NHS and all the vaccinators and leaders of the NHS in the different nations, and it does need a little more time to set up.
Thank you, Hugh Pym. Well, there has been a slight increase in the number of Covid-19 infections across the UK, according to the latest data. Estimates from the Office for National Statistics suggest just over 1 million people in the UK would have tested positive for coronavirus in the week ending the 27th of November. That is up slightly from the week before. Now, a father and his partner are being sentenced for killing his 6-year-old son in Solihull. Thomas Hughes and Emma Tustin had beaten and starved Arthur Labinho Hughes before his death from a head injury in June last year. Tustin was yesterday convicted of murder. Hughes was found guilty of manslaughter. Our correspondent Phil Mackey has been following the case and joins me from the court in Coventry. Phil.
Yeah, there's a brief adjournment in the sentencing hearing. The judge will come back and actually hand down those sentences in about 10 minutes' time. It'll probably take about half an hour till we get to the point when we hear how long both Emma Tustin and Thomas Hughes will have to serve in prison. Emma Tustin faces a mandatory life sentence, but of course the judge will decide what the minimum tariff is, how long she'll have to serve in prison before she's eligible for parole. We've heard victim impact statements this morning. First from Joanna Hughes. She's Arthur's paternal grandmother. She described Arthur as a happy, joyous and exuberant 6-year-old child, and she added that Arthur was failed by the very authorities that we as a society are led to believe are there for the safety of everyone. There's an investigation into potential failings that will go on and report next year. And we also heard from Madeleine Halcrow, the other grandmother, who's the mother of Olivia Labinho Hughes, Arthur's natural mother, who described him as their baby bear and said that she was suffering permanent sadness as a result of this. As I said, sentencing will resume in a few minutes' time. We should know how long both will end up in prison for in about half an hour.
Phil Mackey, thank you. The Conservatives have won the Old Bexley and Sidcup by-election, holding on to the stronghold in South East London with a much reduced majority. The contest was triggered by the death of the former minister James Brokenshire, who died of lung cancer at the age of 53. A local Tory councillor, Louis French, succeeds him, as our political correspondent Ione Wells reports.
Wrapped up warm to deliver ballot boxes. Turnout was expected to be low in this cold December by-election, and only 34% of voters turned out. It meant the Tories' majority was cut from 19,000 to about 4,500. But their candidate Louis French still got more than half the vote, although there was a 10% swing to Labour. And Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party, came third.
11,189.
The result was not surprising in this safe Tory seat, even if the opposition had hoped recent negative headlines about so-called sleaze could chip away at their strong majority.
people look at the Westminster issues, they see a number of issues and allegations being thrown around at different parties. It wasn't something that was coming to me. People know I'm not involved or haven't been in Westminster. People have said, Louis, we need to get in and deliver on these priorities, and that's what I'm fully committed to doing.
Labour are encouraged by this result, with their candidate Daniel Francis arguing a swing like that could translate into future gains for them elsewhere.
Well, it's been an incredibly good result tonight for Labour here. We've had a swing of over 10%. If that swing was replicated across the country, we'd be making significant gains from the Conservatives and on a path back to government.
But Tory party chairman Oliver Dowden says a solid hold midway through an election term, when the government might expect a knock, is a good result for them.
Obviously, it's very difficult for governing parties to do well in mid-term by-elections, but we secured over 50% of the vote, and I think that was thanks to a good campaign run by the local candidate.
Tory cheer here in Bexley, but in North Shropshire, nerves are growing for the by-election there in 2 weeks' time, with parties feeling there is a lot more to play for. Ione Wells, BBC News.
Drunken, drugged-up thugs is how the author of an independent review into the disorder at England's Euro 2020 final against Italy describes the ticketless fans who forced their way into Wembley Stadium in July. Our sports correspondent Natalie Perks is at Wembley. This is a damning report, Natalie.
Very much so. It describes a near miss amid a perfect storm. Baroness Casey, the author of the report, called the actions of ticketless, drunken and drugged up thugs shocking and intolerable, with cocaine a key factor. It says a match which should have been a glorious national occasion became a source of national shame. Now, around 2,000 ticketless fans got into Wembley that day. There were 17 mass breaches of gates. One fan pretended to be a steward in order to separate a disabled fan from his father and push his wheelchair through a disabled gate. The report adds, remarkably, it could have been even worse, with a loss of life or serious injury. If England had won that night, there were up to 6,000 ticketless fans waiting to storm into the stadium. One London emergency official quoted in the report said, "If England had won, I think it would have been horrific. I can guarantee we would have been on our knees." Now, the authorities are not let off the hook. The report says there was a collective failure, with opportunities missed to understand just how big this match was, and police arrived far too late. Now, there are police have said in the last hour its officers and stewards faced unprecedented challenges and unacceptable levels of violence, but added that they vowed to work with the FA to learn what went wrong and will take on board the recommendations in this report. Those recommendations include that the government designate a new class of fixture for matches of this national significance, which would demand a greater response from police, and that the FA lead a campaign to bring about a sea change in attitudes. The FA has apologised today, saying collectively we must never allow this to happen again.
Thank you, Natalie Perks. Fraudsters have stolen billions of pounds by abusing the government's Bounceback loan scheme, which was designed to help small businesses survive during the Covid pandemic. A new report from the National Audit Office says more than 1 in 10 of the loans may have been fraudulent, costing the taxpayer nearly £5 billion. The NAO says the measures put in place to prevent fraud were implemented too slowly. Angus Crawford reports.
A hard stop. Police arrest a drug dealer, a member of a Manchester gang that used a front business to hide their crimes. And this is it. From a couple of porter cabins, they plan to take over the local cocaine market. But what's really extraordinary is they managed to get a £25,000 Bounceback loan to help their business through the pandemic. And they weren't the only ones.
It's a Bounceback loan application that's been approved for £50,000.
Last year, this undercover investigator showed us how criminals were setting up fake companies to exploit the system.
It seems to be free money for the scammers. It's going to cost us billions.
£4.9 billion, according to today's report. Anti-fraud measures, it says, were implemented too slowly to be effective and are inadequate.
Well, today we announced a brand new loan scheme for the smaller businesses.
Designed as a lifesaver for small firms, more than £47 billion was handed out. But how much of that will legitimate firms ever pay back?
It's going to be horrendous. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I'm worried. I've asked the government to set up a helpline.
Mike runs an online support group for business owners who took out a loan and now fear they may go bust.
They've now got the repayments starting. And a lot of people simply have not bounced back, which was the whole idea of the scheme. As soon as they're due, it's just going to be a tidal wave. It will be. There's no ifs, buts or shoulds about that.
The NAO says £17 billion may never be repaid. And 100,000 loans are already in arrears.
I've had to contact my doctor about having some antidepressants. I haven't been able to properly sleep for the last 20 months.
£50,000 seemed like a lifesaver for Anne-Marie and her printing firm. It now feels like a millstone.
The Bounceback loan is hanging there over our heads at the moment. You know, at the time, I guess I had two choices. We either take on a loan and carry on and try to just ride through the storm, or we close the doors.
But the storm isn't over.
Well, this is the thing. It's just about starting, I think.
Loans that kept hundreds of thousands of firms alive became a dead weight for others and a cash cow for criminals. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
It is 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. There are promising signs that COVID booster jabs will protect people against the new Omicron variant, with researchers finding that the Pfizer and Moderna jabs give the best overall booster response. Still to come, a home in the UK, finally, for one Afghan family, although thousands more are still waiting.
Coming up on the BBC News channel, the new Manchester United interim manager Ralph Rangnick says he won't rule out staying on in charge beyond his initial 6 months. Rangnick was speaking at his first press conference at United.
A week after Storm Irwin, thousands of people are still without power and the army is being deployed to help. 130 troops have been sent to the Grampian region of northern Scotland and about 100 to northeast England. Durham County Council says that as of last night, between 4,000 and 5,000 properties in the county were still cut off and a major incident has been declared. Lakshmi Gopal reports now from Butterknowle in County Durham.
Warm shelter and hot meals, basics provided by volunteers, offering a lifeline to those without power in Butterknowle in County Durham, where a major incident has been declared, with around 100 army personnel being sent to help.
Hi, Cecil.
Tommy, a volunteer coordinator, has been out visiting people in the community, including 92-year-old Cecil. Joanne is a nurse and lives in Harbottle in Northumberland. She still has no power, no water and no internet.
I'm sleeping in here, which isn't ideal, eating what I can in here, boiling pans of water on the log burner. You know, you can only take so much. Do you know what? I burst into tears, I'm not ashamed to say.
Joanne is now relying on a nearby community centre, along with her neighbour, Anne.
I feel that we've just been left out and forgotten about. I'm more worried about the emergency services, because where we were, there's no signals, no internet. How if somebody needs an ambulance, how are they going to get hold of it?
In Aberdeenshire, the military has already been helping out after the council put out an urgent request. Around 4,000 homes are being visited to offer support.
The infrastructure is pretty fragile. The weather hasn't helped. The high winds that came yesterday have further weakened some places. But we're hoping that it gives them that sort of reassurance that somebody is looking out for them.
Despite this help, numbers of residents are still struggling without power for a week.
They must know when they're going to reconnect my house. But instead of telling me every day that it's only going to be hours, I could have planned for the long haul, not for the short haul. The problem in Aberdeen, as from Saturday, all your camping equipment, gases, coal, everything has been in short demand.
Many people are still left without power and without any certainty about when it will return.
We've got people on the ground and working with the local authorities and local resilience forums to support those customers, and we're making proactive calls out to vulnerable customers, people that have been in touch with us that we know they're in vulnerable situations.
Some have been told it could be the 8th of December, 12 days after the power first went out.
Well, Jane, here in Buttonall, around 250 villagers are entering their second week without power. But thankfully, in the village hall, the lights have remained on, which is why this has become a bit of an emergency refuge. And throughout the morning, we've seen families, children and vulnerable people come in here for a hot breakfast. And as you can see behind me in the kitchen, volunteers are busy stepping up their efforts to provide more hot meals throughout the day, including for lunch. The community really has rallied. It's been a big community effort and one that's been vital for local residents here who've been left in the dark about exactly when their power will come back on.
Lakshmi, thank you. Lakshmi Gopal. At least 26 million people are struggling to access food in the Horn of Africa because of persistent poor rainfall. Drought conditions in northern Kenya, much of Somalia and southern Ethiopia are expected to last well into next year, putting millions of lives at risk. Wild animals are dying in their hundreds and herders have reported losing up to 70% of their livestock. The BBC's senior Africa correspondent Anne Soy reports from Wajir in northern Kenya. Just to warn you, her report contains images from the beginning that you may find upsetting.
The devastating impact of drought. This is Wajir in northern Kenya, a predominantly pastoralist community which coexists with wildlife. Neither has been spared. Water pans long dried up, and the impact can be seen almost everywhere.
This is every pastoralist's wealth. This man has lost a lot of it, 140 cattle, hundreds of goats, and he fears that whatever is remaining here could be lost because the drought is still ongoing. You can see this calf, she's too weak to stand up, and so she has to be fed right here.
A few times every day, neighbors help to lift the remaining livestock so that they can stretch their already weak muscles.
The loss is devastating. I can't do anything more to save them. It's God's will. I just pray for rain to come. Livestock is everything for me.
He has to balance between buying food for his family and livestock whenever he gets money, mostly from well-wishers. The local chief also comes to help. He shows me where he moved Ibrahim's dead livestock to.
Ibrahim was deeply affected. His blood pressure rose, so I took him to my house to calm him down.
Even deep in the wild, conditions are no better. In Sabuli Conservancy, rangers told us hundreds of animals had died. They now bring them water every day, but there's no pasture. The animals are starving. Their immunity is getting weaker, so more deaths are expected. The drought isn't just in northern Kenya. Neighboring Somalia has declared a humanitarian emergency. Southern Ethiopia is also hit hard, but there's little focus on it due to the conflict in the country. Experts warn that things could get worse in the region.
The period of recovery between one drought to the next, or one flood to the next, is becoming shorter and shorter. So how this translates is that local communities, for example, are having very, very short periods to be able to recover.
Like many pastoralists, Ibrahim is hoping some of his livestock survives. He'll keep trying everything until conditions change. But every day brings him more losses and heartbreak, and he's barely surviving himself. Anne Soy, BBC News, Wajir.
The Formula One team Mercedes has been criticised for signing a deal with the firm that made part of the cladding used for Grenfell Tower. Survivors of the Grenfell Tower fire, which killed 72 people in 2017, said the team's sponsorship by Kingspan was truly shocking. The Housing Secretary Michael Gove and his Labour counterpart Lisa Nandy have both condemned the partnership. Kingspan and Mercedes said the manufacturer fully supports the ongoing public inquiry into the fire. Yorkshire County Cricket Club has announced a series of departures as it continues to deal with racism allegations made by former player Azim Rafiq. Director of Cricket Martin Moxon and coach Andrew Gale have now left the club, along with all members of the coaching team and the backroom medical team. The club chair, Lord Patel, said difficult decisions were required to build a progressive and inclusive culture. An Afghan man who worked as an interpreter for British Armed Forces has a new home in the UK after escaping from the country. Burhan Vessel feared for his life after the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan this summer. Like thousands of other Afghans brought to the UK, Mr. Vessel and his family have spent the last 100 days living in a hotel. But unlike many of their fellow Afghans, the Vessels have been offered a home in Aberdeenshire by a total stranger. Our correspondent Lucy Manning has the story.
Oh, I'm so pleased to meet you at long last.
Kindness often repeats itself. Sometimes it only takes one person to change the lives of others. The Vessel family at the end of their long journey to a home.
I'm so pleased to meet you. I'm so pleased to meet you.
When Kabul collapsed, we were just left behind in a dark room.
We first spoke to Burhan, a former interpreter with British forces, when he was hiding in Afghanistan, fearful for his life. A day before the suicide bomb at the airport, he risked the crush there and managed to get his family out.
How are you and all the family doing?
Everyone is okay, and now we are in safety.
Our BBC reports about Burhan resonated. 75 years ago, another British Army interpreter was given refuge from Germany. Helga McFarlane's mother, Helena.
I saw the report of the Afghan refugees coming in from Kabul on the army plane and the story of the Vessel family. And my mother had been a refugee during the Second World War and fled from her home. And she only survived through the kindness of people along the way. And I just felt I had to do something and give back something for the kindness and the humanity that helped my mother and her family survive.
After 100 days in a hotel room together, the night before their move, Sepher and his family, so far from their life in Afghanistan, are finally about to start a new one.
Sepher, how do you feel about going to Aberdeen?
Good.
What are you excited about?
I'm excited about toys.
This is your new house.
From the Taliban, a dangerous evacuation, a new country, cramped hotel rooms, to his own bedroom.
Look in there. What do you see? The toys.
Narcis left everything behind. Her work as a gynecologist, her relatives. Now she must start again.
And you make it the way you want it. Yeah. You change anything, you make it the way you want it.
Your generosity and your kind heart will be never forgotten. No words to express it, but still we have good humans inside this world, yeah. and you are an example.
Thank you so much. You're part of our family now.
Thank you so much.
And you're so welcome.
That report from Lucy Manning. Now, Panto season is upon us. Oh, yes, it is. It is a hugely important period for theatres, many of which make a fifth of their annual income in the weeks before Christmas. But there is uncertainty this year for the teams that run theatres and the performers against the backdrop of COVID. Our entertainment correspondent Colin Patterson has been watching rehearsals.
Stop me 'cause I'm having a good time, having a good time, yeah.
Rehearsals for Cinderella at Southampton's Mayflower Theatre, with a familiar face readying himself for his role as the wicked stepmother.
Craig, tell us where we are.
Well, we are in where all the dresses are, darling, where all these wonderful frocks. Look at them. So if you put a bit of COVID weight on, darling, you'll need to have them extended, like me.
The 2020 Panto season was wiped out by COVID, so Craig Revel-Horwood is thrilled that this year everything is still set to go ahead, and he knows just how crucial this is for venues all around the country.
Panto is so important to theatre as a whole because it provides actually the money that is necessary to get the theatre through the rest of the year, for the entire year. It will pay for that whole season. I'm talking about all the people backstage, the lighting, the ushers, everything, every part of it, the box office staff. I mean, it's endless.
Are you ready, boys and girls? Yes! Then I give you Cinderella.
Debbie McGee plays the fairy godmother and wishes she could cast a spell to ensure everything goes ahead, because she fears if what happened last year is repeated, it could be curtains for many venues, and not in a good way.
I've done a lot of touring in the provinces, and a lot of the tiny theatres that I've worked in over the years have gone. I mean, it's quite heartbreaking. It is, because life is changing, and I think it would be really sad if we lost live theatre. So, you know, we just pray and hope that we all get through this winter.
Early reports suggest that Panto ticket sales are down, but not by as much as expected, and many theatre goers, but not all, are ready to return.
The one that we're going to is local, so I think it's not going to be very crowded there. It's a Jack and a Beanstalk in a village hall.
I feel safe around everyone, and if you wear a mask and whatever, I haven't caught the COVID thing yet, so yeah, it's all right, it's all right.
I just think it's too much of a risk, even though I've been triple jabbed and I've had COVID, but I still don't want to get in that environment.
It's tradition, isn't it? Yeah. It's a lovely tradition. Oh yes, it is.
There are changes this year. Audiences are being asked to wear masks, and most shows have axed the children's ensemble from the cast to reduce risks. But for many Pantos opening in the next week, the cry truly is, "Don't stop me now."
Not now.
Colin Patterson, BBC News.
That takes us into a look at the weekend weather. Follow that, Stav Daneos. Hello.
Hello, thanks very much, Jane. Good afternoon to you. Temperatures have been up and down this week. We started off on a very cold note. It turned milder on Tuesday, and then we've seen temperatures rise again through this afternoon. So less cold today, I'd say, milder in the south. There is a lot of cloud around, though, with this moisture-laden air coming in off the Atlantic. Quite a messy pressure chart here. There's some weather fronts poised to push in to bring some wetter weather towards the end of the day, particularly across the southwest. But you can see the extent of the milder air, particularly for England and Wales. A little less cold across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but the blue colours will make a return just in time for the weekend. Yes, yeah, it is going to be turning colder. Here's the satellite picture and the radar. You can see the extent of the cloud. Probably the best of any brightness will be across northeast England and Scotland, but here we'll have plenty of showers rattling in northern and western areas as the afternoon wears on. And then there's that area of rain I was talking about pushing into the southwest and South Wales later in the day, but elsewhere it should stay dry, albeit rather cloudy, those winds coming in from the west. Temperatures could reach 11-12 degrees in the south, could see 12 or 13 perhaps in the Channel Islands, further north at 6 to 10 Celsius. Now tonight that rain pushes away from the south of England, and then it's followed by a rush of showers blowing down from the northwest, and with it some colder air will move in, so these showers turning increasingly wintry, certainly over the hills in the north. There's temperatures down to around 1 to 6 degrees. So for the weekend it is feeling much colder. We're in a run of northerly, northwesterly winds, and we'll have low pressure nearby, so it's going to be one of sunshine and showers. Here's the area of low pressure sweeping down in towards the North Sea. That opens the floodgates to Arctic air blowing down from Iceland. So a cold feeling start to Saturday. Early rain clears from the southeast. There will be quite a bit of sunshine around. These showers will become more widespread and frequent, particularly across northern and western areas through the day, some merging together to produce longer spells of rain, and there will be some snow, even down to lower levels, but certainly over the hills. These are mean wind speeds. It's going to be a windy day, but gusts will be higher than that, and that'll take the edge off the temperatures even further. Highs are only 5 to 8 degrees. Factor in the wind, it will feel colder than that. It's a cold start to Sunday, but it looks like we'll see more in the way of sunshine, particularly across western areas. There is always a chance of further showers or longer spells of rain across eastern parts of the UK. And again, it's going to be another chilly day. Back to you, Jane.
All right, Stav, thanks very much, Stav Daneos. And just a reminder of our top story this lunchtime. There are promising signs that COVID booster jabs will protect people against the new Omicron variant, with researchers finding that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines give the best overall booster response. That is all from the News at 1 team for this week. Indeed, have a good weekend. You can keep up to date with all our stories on the BBC News channel, of course. On BBC One, let's join our news teams now, wherever you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.